Hello and a very warm welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from Haifa in northern Israel. I'm Gaurav Savant. Today is the Yom Kippur Day. It's the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, and this is a day when this country comes to a virtual standstill. There are no public transport on the roads or no trains on the rail track. But do remember, if history is anything to go by, Yom Kippur is the day or around this time that this country has been attacked twice. First in 1973 when Egypt and Syria mounted a combined attack on Israel, and then again 2023 when Hamas terrorists attacked this country on the 7th of October. So around this holiday time, this country is extremely vulnerable. And it is said those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. And that is why the security forces are on a state of highest alert here in Israel at this point of time. The country is observing Yom Kippur. People are at home or in synagogue, but security forces, emergency workers, hospitals, all on a state of operational alertness. The Israeli Air Force, it's constantly flying in the sky, of course keeping sensitivities in mind. They're not giving out a lot of information right now about operations that are underway. We're reporting relentlessly from ground zero on the day's developments.
Israel ramps up offensive. Strikes UN peacekeeper positions in Lebanon. India voices concern over attack on UN positions. Barrage of rockets fired at Haifa. Multi-front war escalates. Israel hints at Iran retaliation.
Close to midnight, first
India today in the war zone.
And in the past 24 hours, Hezbollah has fired over 200 projectiles, by some accounts between 200 and 250 projectiles into Israel. And these rockets and missiles haven't just been fired in the area of northern Israel, usually Haifa, where I am right now, and Galil. These are the areas that are directly in the line of fire, apart from, of course, short-range rockets that are fired in Metula and Rosh Nikra, which are quite up north. That is where the real action is taking place. That's the area that's been declared a designated military zone. But even towards central Israel, there are multiple rockets that were fired in the past 24 hours, especially in the last 12 hours as Israel observes the Yom Kippur Day. And while all those rockets and projectiles have been neutralized in the past 24 hours, there are reports of some damage to property. Fortunately, no loss of life. Loss of life was reported day before yesterday when 2 civilians were severely injured, and one later succumbed to injuries because of intense bleeding in that rocket attack. But at the same time, Israel too has stepped up its offensive against the Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel has fired a large number of rockets and missiles and air-to-ground rockets that have been fired even in the heart of Beirut. The death toll in Beirut has now risen to 22. The injuries, we are told by some accounts, has crossed over 100, and parts of eastern Beirut that were never targeted even in the 2006 conflict or the conflicts before that, those areas have also been targeted by Israel in Lebanon. And this is what makes the situation extremely precarious. And I want to quickly take you to ground zero. Directly in the line of fire is India Today's Ashutosh Mishra reporting from ground zero. Ashutosh, newer areas are now in the line of the Israeli fire, not just restricted to southern Lebanon, but even in Beirut, the capital, newer areas have been targeted. What's the latest that you can tell us about the ground situation right now?
It's all chaos and fear. Mostly people see Gaurav staying indoors. Largely the big market, despite this being a holiday, a Friday, Saturday happens to be the holiday. I see mostly the places deserted. All these markets unusual, that are usually crowded, are looking totally unusual. The Mediterranean line behind me, where on the weekends you see the number of fishermen or the locals with their boats and yachts venturing out, absolutely maintaining a calm. And here, forget the situation about the south. This is what's happening in the central and the eastern part, largely flooded with the tourists. Of course, we have seen no tourists, almost all have evacuated. But in the meanwhile, since this morning, you mentioned about the Hezbollah attack in the northern Israel. There have been similar offensive by the Israeli Air Force, particularly tracking the trajectory of these projectiles were fired upon. So since this morning, there have been two major airstrikes in Ghasania area and also in Zefta and Nabatia. So three major airstrikes have been carried out since this morning. As we speak, the Iranian speaker had just landed on his way to Sweden, where he was going to meet the union of the speakers of all over the world gathering. Just before he made a surprise halt on the invitation of the Iranian speaker, on the invitation of a Lebanese speaker, the Iranian parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf just made a surprise landing at the Beirut airport. He stayed there for a couple of hours. He met the Lebanese speaker, extending the support to the resistance forces, the Hezbollah. They're fighting on the cause of Palestine.
Okay.
But what it looks like, a larger the reason, because the way Hezbollah has brought this battle at the doorstep for Lebanon, for the civilians of Lebanon, this is now literally dragging the entire region further, Gaurav.
It indeed is, and what Iran calls as axis of resistance is what Israel calls our terrorists, whether it's the Hamas, the Hezbollah, the Houthis, or even directly Iran, which Israel calls the fountainhead of terror. But there are major developments. There are multiple major developments that are taking place even as we speak. There's been a major cyber attack. There are reports of a major cyber attack that have taken place in Iran. There are multiple cyber attacks that have taken place in Iran, and the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, their cyber attacks have taken place. We are told that there are multiple Yes, we are told that we're being told that you must keep your volume low and be quiet, because this is Yom Kippur and there is an apprehension that there could be an incoming attack. It's usually in the afternoon. It's 11:35, so usually around 12 o'clock is the time when people prefer to go indoors, because that's the time that there is apprehension that rockets could come in. So the situation here remains extremely precarious. But if I were to tell you the latest that's happening in Lebanon, major impact of the rocket attacks that have taken place and the missile attacks that have taken place in Iran. There are reports of a massive cyber attack that has taken place on the nuclear infrastructure. There's been a cyber attack. Of course, Israel hasn't claimed responsibility for it, but there is an apprehension that this could well be the beginning of a counter attack. So what's happening in Lebanon? Let's get you some reactions.
أن ضربة تل أبيب ليست سوى البداية، وما حصل في الأيام الأخيرة في حيفا وعكا ونهاريا وصفد يؤكد أننا لازلنا في البداية. وإلى العدو أقول لن ترى بعد إلا القليل.
And just as we were telling you, there's a big story that's happening in Iran. There are reports in the region that there's been a very massive cyber attack that has taken place on the nuclear infrastructure in Iran. This hasn't been officially confirmed by state agencies in Iran, but there are reports that are emerging from Iran and being widespreadly quoted in the region that there's been a cyber attack, not just on nuclear infrastructure, but there's been an attack on the executive, legislature and judiciary. And this cyber attack is very massive, and this isn't the first time that a cyber attack of this nature has taken place in Iran. If you'd recall, in August 2024, there was a major cyber attack on the banking system in Iran, and that was something that could have brought the country down on its knees. I once again want to bring in India Today's Ashutosh Mishra for more on the story. Ashutosh, what more can you tell us about the cyber attack that's being reported that's taken place in Iran? Because this by some accounts could well be the beginning of a multi-pronged offensive. The pager attacks that took place in Lebanon, the cyber attacks that are taking place in Iran, can they be linked? Is there a bigger picture that's emerging?
Well, Iranian official state agency will never acknowledge this kind of threat, and perhaps they know the magnitude of this impact, having the cyber attack on their nuclear facilities, on their military communication, on their banking system has already been vulnerable. Iran having a full-fledged, one of the most powerful country of the Middle East, and the way kind of military logistics and communication and the safest network that they used despite this hacking perhaps has done by the adversary. But this kind of retaliation, it could be the part of one retaliation that Israel plans to, including a military strike on their military installations sooner or later. But has it done by the Israel? That hasn't been acknowledged yet. Is there been an attack? The Iranian agencies are not yet clearing the air about the magnitude of the attacks. But what we are reading from the the Iranian agencies, their social media network, their Telegram network, it suggests the literally larger blackout. So this has literally shut down the entire communication system, the financial system, the military communication, and this vulnerability actually helps the adversaries to penetrate deep in their system and perhaps opt out the data requirement that could be potentially used by the adversaries in this kind of war, because it is not only a battle that they are fighting in the airspace from either it's ballistic missile fired or the way Israel uses its fighter jet, but also about the intelligence. So such kind of cyber attacks on Iran perhaps suggest there is a huge breach of the security, and this would help Iran's adversary to collect massive data that will help out probably in upcoming days when we see a larger escalation between Israel and Iran. Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely. All of this is part, as many argue, of the multi-domain warfare. Warfare is now not just restricted to on ground or in the air, it's even in cyberspace, and a cyber attack on a country is a way to bring a country down to its knees without firing a single bullet. But is this a part of that multi-domain warfare remains to be seen. This is something that every country guards against. For example, there were reports in August 2024 when Iran was a victim of a massive cyber attack. Its entire banking system, data of those who put their money in banks was compromised, and there were some reports that seemed to indicate that Iran had paid big money, millions of dollars in the dark web to ensure that its data was not leaked out. But we'll track that story very closely. How will Israel respond? Because this cannot just be a response that you can talk about in hushed tones. Will it just be a Mossad kind of an operation the way Ismail Haniyeh was taken out? Or after 181 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel, 181 ballistic missiles, the biggest in the history of warfare in this region, when 181 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel, now they're asking, will Israel resort to a similar air, land and sea attack, including a cyber attack on Iran? I spoke to Ariel Kilner. He's one of the members of parliament, a member of the Knesset here. He's also a member of the Security and Foreign Affairs Committee of the Israeli parliament. Let's listen in to what Ariel Kilner had to say. Iran targeted Israel with over 180 ballistic missiles. Now it's been over 10 days. Is there a delay in Israel's response? And if so, what's the reason for the delay?
Israel has the right to defend itself, and Israel will defend itself. I won't go into specifics here, but we will ensure the security of our people, and we will protect our people. I can ensure it. This is something I can say for sure.
The ground situation right now, you're facing a threat on multiple fronts. What can you tell me if we take it front by front? The latest front where we are, the Haifa port right behind you, and Hezbollah continues to try and fire rockets into the Haifa Bay. They're targeting various parts of northern Israel. How grim is the situation according to you?
More than a year, Israel has been attacked by radical Islamists from the south, from the north, from 7 directions. War in a war. Our war is the war of the free world. It's not only ours war, but it is a war for our existence, and we are going to win this war. We will achieve the total victory, and these barbarian attacks of Hezbollah, like Hamas. They shoot, they try to kill Israelis, innocent civilians. These barbarian attacks, this total evil.
Is there an apprehension that Israel is biting more than it can chew, fighting a war on multiple fronts? Because if you were to target Iran, the apprehension is Iran's strike back. 181 missiles fired so far. They could fire, perhaps they say they have more than 3,000 ballistic missiles.
Israel knows how to defend itself, and Israel ready to defend itself, and the people in Israel are very strong. We have, and our army is also very strong.
What can you tell me about the criticism that's coming Israel's way, whether it's in Gaza, where they say 42,000 civilians have been killed, or in Lebanon, where they're saying in Beirut, the striking of Beirut is leading to a lot of civilian casualties. Hezbollah leadership is dying, but civilians are also dying, and Israel is targeting civilians. There is a criticism that Israel has also targeted the United Nations UNIFIL in Nakura in southern Lebanon.
We are sorry for any innocent casualties. In contrast to our enemies, we try to and we attack only the terrorists themselves, while they shoot on innocent civilians, try to kill innocent civilians, and in a war sometimes we are very sorely. And unfortunately, there are casualties of innocent people. We don't want to, it's not our goal. We didn't start this war. This is a war we are fighting because we were attacked unprovokedly by these radical Islamist organizations.
Sir, for joining me here on India Today, many thanks.
Thank you very much.
So nothing is off the table, nothing is on the table. Very diplomatic answer for a member of the Security Committee of the Parliament of Israel. But I also spoke to a former minister and the former energy minister of Israel, Eliezer Moody Sandberg. Now, Eliezer Moody Sandberg is of the opinion that Israel should strike at the nuclear infrastructure in Iran because it will benefit the world if Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. His appreciation is the United States and the free world should stand with Israel as the free world, in his words, targets Iran's nuclear infrastructure. As far as oil is concerned, when I asked him that if you target the oil infrastructure in Iran, global oil prices will go up, he says initially it may, but in the long run, Iran will not have surplus funds to fund terrorist organizations like the Hamas, the Hezbollah and the Houthis. So his appreciation is whether it's the nuclear infrastructure or the oil infrastructure, they should all be not just on the table, but directly in the line of fire. Israel must have wargamed this many times. Iran, according to Israel, has used its proxies in the past to target Israel, whether it's the Hamas or the Hezbollah or the Houthi. This time, Iran has done it directly. Why do you think, as someone who's been in the government, someone who's been in the parliament, someone who's been energy minister of this country and infrastructure minister of this country, why do you think Iran got involved directly?
Well, I think that the situation deteriorated from the point of view of Iran to the situation where basically the proxies are almost eliminated, and if not eliminated, at least their ability to influence or attack Israel is shrinked or minimized. In this situation, when all that happened in a relatively very short time, especially with the Hezbollah, if Iran will not react in any way, that will be a very strong sign of weakness from the side of their supporters and their allies in the region. And also, Iran is not only threatening Israel. In the first cycle, Iran threatens the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, all the more peaceful countries in the Middle East. Israel is the excuse of Iran to attack many other countries. You mentioned two of the proxies. The Houthis also suffered, but there are more in West Iraq and in other places. This is why I think they had to act.
And over the past 8 days, I've been trying to get you a number of voices from within Israel, from the police to the Israeli Defense Forces to their political leaders to former political leaders and even youngsters on ground. For example, I caught up with a group of youngsters, young teenagers who are just about to join the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, it's mandatory for every Israeli citizen to serve in the armed forces or the police. It's 2 years for women, it's 3 years for men. I caught up with a young group who were actually watching our show while I was anchoring, and they wanted to join in. Listen in. What do you want to tell your viewers in India? What's your name?
Okay, so my name is Gali, and I want to say I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for India being supportive of Israel and having our backs.
Okay, tell me your name and tell me what do you do?
My name is Noya, and what happened in October 7, it's terrible. They raped the women and men and killed babies. So it's terrible what happened, and we need to end Hamas.
Tell me, what are your thoughts right now, as your country fights Hamas and Hezbollah and of course the threat within your country?
I think Israelis should stick together, and the war is just I think the most horrible thing that happened to us in like the past 10 years, and it's horrifying to see how the hostages are still in Gaza, even though it's been 1 year since then. And I'm very concerned about the Israeli soldiers. I want them to come back home safe and go back to their families. And I think Israel would win eventually, and everything will be okay.
Are these also your thoughts, especially at a time when Israel is battling Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north?
We need to bring home all the hostages because they kidnap. And we need to end Hamas, Hezbollah, all the terrorist organizations. We need to end them right now.
I just also want to find out, as youngsters, do you get time to go out and enjoy life, or is it all about you may be enjoying a party and suddenly there's this air raid siren and rockets could be coming in?
I think even though we're continuing with our lives, even though like I lost an uncle in this war and it's very sad, but still I continue with my life. I go to parties, I go with my friends out, I'm going to restaurants or just usual parties, and if a siren attacks us, we're just going to the safe.
We were on the bus, and suddenly was a sirens, yeah, and we don't have a safe place, so we
went behind a restroom, and we laid on the ground just to be safe, and we were very scared because we weren't at home, and it was in the middle of the street, and out of nowhere we were on a bus. We went outside and laid on the ground, and we stayed safe.
But that hasn't, life hasn't been impacted. You still live life to the fullest, is the impression I get in
Yes,
Israel.
but we're scared, suddenly sirens.
I can say I've been in school since then, and every time I go to school, I have a siren, and it's very scary and stressful. And when we just hear them, we start running outside to find a safe place. And every time it attacks us every hour, and it's so hard to keep living like that. And I just want the war to end.
So ever since 7th of October 2023, Israel has been in a state of war, or as some argue, Israel since its inception has been in a state of war. There are just some patches of peace, but look at what's happening across. Let me now take you to Lebanon to get you what's happening to people in Lebanon. It's life in a war zone, extremely tough, because it's the Hezbollah that's fighting Israel. It's not the people of Lebanon. And Lebanon doesn't just have Shia Muslims. There may be 75% Shia Muslims south of that Litani River in southern Lebanon, but not all of them are anti-Israel. At least that's the impression here in Israel. Plus, you also have about you have Coptic Christians, you have Sunni Muslims who've in the past been at war with the Shia Muslims within Lebanon. That's a country that's seen civil war. But now, even across Lebanon, the situation is in a state of flux. Initially, they had Palestinian refugees coming in, then they had Syrian refugees coming in when the war between Assad regime and the ISIS began. So there were lakhs of refugees who came to Lebanon, running away from battle, but the battle followed them there, and now they're running back to Syria. Some are trying to run back to Palestine. Some don't know where to run, and this is what their life is in this region.
This video released by Israel shows the military chief and head of Shin Bet security agency locked in an assessment meeting inside southern Lebanon. Israeli strikes remain unabated in the country to Israel's north. Ahmed Al-Khatib was sitting with his family on Thursday when the explosion from an Israeli strike rocked his building in central Beirut. The force of the blast has severely damaged Al-Khatib's apartment, tearing down the walls and leaving his entire space exposed to the destruction outside in the strike site.
We were just sitting like everyone else in their homes. Suddenly there was an explosion. My wife and daughter were under the rubble, and I was sitting with my mother-in-law in another room. Because of the intensity of explosion, this part was the one that got affected, where my wife and daughter were. I couldn't see anything. Everything went black. I took out my daughter from our room and gave her to my mother-in-law. My wife was trapped here. I took her out. They took her to the hospital and she is now in the ICU. Thank God my daughter is now better.
Rescue and clearing rubble operations were underway more than 24 hours after the strike. A senior Hezbollah official evaded an Israeli assassination attempt in the city, according to 3 security sources, but it killed 22 people and more than 100 were injured. The street near the apartments has transformed into a scene of chaos. The pavement remained lined with a row of battered cars and littered with glass shards and shattered debris.
I was praying. We heard the first strike and I thought it was in my house. The second one was much powerful than the first one. People went down barefoot. They were screaming. We didn't know anything at the start. I went to see where the strike was and I saw that in my house. The glass and windows had shattered. It was a horrifying scene. It was something unbelievable.
The Lebanese government has said that some 1.2 million people have been displaced by the conflict so far, and the number is expected to grow. While hundreds of thousands have fled across the border into neighboring Syria, there's a major surge in the number of people attempting to flee to other countries by sea. Members of the civil defense in Lebanon have vowed to continue their work despite fearing for their lives. 5 of their colleagues died in an Israeli airstrike on Wednesday.
This affected us psychologically for sure. We have personal relationships with all the team. We have known each one for at least 10 years. We were spiritless and depressed last night to the maximum. But in the end, we have to be there for the people of the area and the city. We can't let go of our duty.
The Lebanese Health Ministry reported that more than 100 paramedics and 11 civil defense members had been killed by Israeli airstrikes since the escalation in fighting began. Across the border, mourners gathered to attend the funeral of an Israeli woman who was killed along with her partner in a rocket attack from Lebanon into northern Israel the previous day. Relatives of hostages held in Gaza and supporters gathered in Tel Aviv to call for their release. It's been over a year and they're still waiting.
When we lose hope, we'll lose our hostages. There is no other choice. We have to be hopeful. We have to bring them home. Like you said, it's been over a year that 101 hostages, Israelis and of other nationalities, are held captive in Gaza. Our government has failed us. We call upon the world to join forces and bring our people home and bring them back. This is a global humanitarian issue.
An Israeli airstrike on a school sheltering displaced people in the Gaza Strip killed at least 27 people on Thursday. That toll is likely to rise. Israel has continued to strike at what it says are militant targets across the Palestinian enclave, even as attention is shifted to its war against Hezbollah in Lebanon and rising tensions with Iran. Violence has surged in the West Bank since the Israel-Hamas war erupted over a year ago. In this period, more than 740 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire in the West Bank alone. The region continues to burn, killing people, injuring them, and scarring the survivors mentally for life. Bureau Report, India Today.
Israel says it's fighting a war on 7 fronts. It's a war for survival. It's a war to ensure that what Iran calls as axis of resistance, what Israel calls is axis of terror, Hamas, Houthi, Hezbollah, and of course Iran. Israel says it will fight to decimate its adversaries. And we'll be reporting this story from Ground Zero, getting you all aspects, a 360-degree perspective of the latest developments. That is all I have for you on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks for watching.